Good morning, guys. Once again, it is I, the chairman, reviewing more physical media, and I have a bit to cover today, so let's get going. So first thing I wanted to cover was the Mad Max 4K anthology of the four Mad Max films: Mad Max 1979, then Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior 1981, and then Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome 1985, and then the most recent one, which was Mad Max Fury Road, came out in 2015, I believe. Now, my experience with the Mad Max films is that clearly Road Warrior was the one I knew the most. I hadn't seen any of the other three actually, until very recently. I had Mad Max individually on 4K, as well as the one from Kino, and then also the Mad Max Fury Road 4K. And so we watched through those, and I figured, well, you know, this was on sale, and I hadn't seen Beyond Thunderdome, so got that and I watched through that. So I really won't give my impressions of my experience with the films chronologically. I guess we'll just go through the four films, both as films as well as the way they look and sound on 4K. So Mad Max 1, so we'll call it that, really was a revelation, the way that it appeared in 4K. The restoration was very well done. The feeling of motion, the kineticness with the car chases, and just the kind of raw, grittier, clearly much more lower budgeted feel really came through, and it still looked great. It was actually a very pristine looking restoration. It was on par with Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior in terms of like the really nice looking scenes. They both really looked about as good. And the one thing that you feel is that with Mad Max, it still seemed to be set in a modern society. Now you could kind of tell that things were going downhill, but there was still police, there was still civilization, there was still a sense of society going on. And this was a film in which Max talked the most. He was the most, I guess, fleshed out as a character, and you could really tell that that he was still trying to keep a hold of his, I guess, sanity and his humanity, if you will, because he still had his wife and child. And then in the later films, he just becomes this wandering loner, almost like a man with no name kind of persona. He becomes more mythical, much more of a legendary character, and he's treated as such, especially in The Road Warrior and in Fury Road. You really get that feeling. And then, so The Road Warrior, you know, what more can I say? Also looks great. There are some scenes where, you know, it's a little darker. The quality transitions down and softens up. But that's one thing that you get with these older films, shot on film, transferred to 4K, is that not every scene is going to be pristine. And actually, I'm not even sure if this is the one with the corrected sound on the Mad Max 4K, sorry, the Road Warrior 4K, or if it isn't. Now, Bill Hunt sent out a tweet in which on the wrapper there is an updated UPC code to let you know. And I had already taken this off well before I saw that tweet, so I don't know. Sounded fine to me, so I really couldn't notice or tell any difference. And I think the issue was not even on the Atmos soundtrack, but on the 5.1 and the 2.0 soundtracks that were just downscaled from the Atmos. So in that case, I didn't even watch it on those soundtracks anyway, so I couldn't tell. Now with regard to Beyond the Thunderdome, I'd never seen that. Obviously, I was very well aware of it, and clearly it's the least well remembered of the Mad Max films. And I didn't know why until I saw this, and I kind of think I know why. And it's because, well, the film kind of goes I don't know. Some people say it goes off the rails because Max gets banished from the Barter Town, which is run by the Tina Turner character Auntie-M, or sorry, just Auntie, or Auntie-Entity, and he goes wandering off in the desert as he is wont to do, and he gets discovered by this colony of children living all by themselves, and kind of starts turning into Lord of the Flies a little bit. They speak in this kind of uneducated patois. Um, they think he's this. They think Max is this Captain Walker, this pilot of a crashed airplane, and you're kind of led to assume that these children are the children of the survivors of the airplane crash. But there's like seems to be way too many of them, and some of those kids are really young, so you kind of never understand exactly where they came from. And so this film is one that really kind of cranks up the kind of the mythical, the mythical aspect of the Mad Max story, where Mad Max is kind of this, not even a real person, but like I said, as it was developing in the Road Warrior, he's almost a legendary figure, a guy who goes from place to place and just kind of helps people out, and then when he's done, then he disappears. And the other thing, of course, was that Beyond Thunderdome, the rating went down to PG-13, so it did not have the violence and the occasional nudity that the Road Warrior had. It seemed almost like Miller was trying to make something a little bit more for children. Now, the timing of this film is interesting because I think it actually came out before Goonies and a few of the other films that seemed to, during the mid-'80s, that seemed to be specifically featuring younger children, younger characters. So I'm not sure where he got this idea from of going with this direction of the story, but it seemed to kind of fit in with that mid-'80s theme of, with Goonies, and you got other films like maybe a little bit of E.T., where the main characters aren't adults; they're children. So I don't know if that's where he got that idea from, but it could be. So I'm just speculating. And then we go 30 years until we get Fury Road, and Fury Road's obviously been well lauded for the action, for the return of Mad Max. Obviously, no longer played by Mel Gibson, but now played by Tom Hardy. And the character of Max, as played by Tom Hardy, is, well, he speaks even less in this film than he does in the other ones, and that's been well noted. He doesn't really play him like Mel Gibson does. He's comes off very strange. The portrayal of his voice, actually, throughout the first half, I'm not even sure what kind of accent he's going for. He's obviously not going for an Australian accent. He's just kind of going with his own accent. And then later on, he does speak more, and he's even more stoic, taciturn, even more of like this kind of wandering legendary figure who just comes and goes. And one of the things you notice about Fury Road is that it's really a rehash of the Road Warrior. If you break the plot down to its most basic, its most basic concepts, so Max is this wandering guy. He falls in with a group of people who have a truck, or in the case of the Road Warrior, need a truck, transporting something that the bad guy, who is a masked, disfigured, cult-like leader, who has a whole band of crazy followers driving an armada of trucks, is now in pursuit of them for. And so Max, reluctantly, at first, agrees to help out this band of people who need to escape from this crazy cult-like leader and find a better place to live. And so, yeah, as far as Fury Road is pretty much an homage to the Road Warrior in every respect, even down to the end when Max no longer doesn't stay with the band of, I guess, what you'll call the heroes, and then he goes off on his own. So if you were to watch these films in quick succession, it would be pretty clear that, wait a minute, for everything that's different about Fury Road, it really is a lot like the Road Warrior, almost to the point where it's like, this is the same movie, essentially. I mean, because Max isn't even really the main character. It's like Furiosa is the main character. Max is just kind of there because it's a Mad Max film, and therefore you're going to call it Mad Max. But he's really a supporting character, in a film that's named after him. And but then again, in the Road Warrior, he was kind of like that too, because the story wasn't really about him. It was about um, the group of people with the gasoline refinery and their journey, and not really his. So so it is really curious, the way the Mad Max series has been written, that Max isn't really the main character in his own story. Sorry, the main character in these stories for most of the time. So it's interesting. Now, obviously, it's been 30 years. So if you're a Mad Max fan, 30 years later, and you come back to watch Fury Road, you're not really thinking about it, because there's been such a long period of time gone by that you're just interested to see Max, and then not really thinking about the fact that this film is really just, I'm not going to say rip off, because they've all been directed by the same man, except for Beyond Thunderdome, which was co-directed by George Miller and another guy, but for all intents and purposes, he's been the same director. So I mean, I guess you can rip off your own self, but I gave him a pass because he's the author of this series. But anyway, yeah. So anyone could be forgiven for thinking that this is essentially a rip off. Fury Road is essentially a rip off of Road Warrior. Now, the one thing I did notice specifically about the 4K of Fury Road being a modern film is that it has this odd thing of perhaps suffering from being a bit too old of a 4K, and it's really kind of unfortunate, because it's a symptom of those earlier 4Ks, the ones that came out 2015, 2016, where the 4K is actually has a higher resolution than what the film itself was shot with. Because Mad Max, according to IMDb, was shot in 2.8K, and then digital intermediate was 2K. So then to put it in a 4K, you're essentially doubling. You're having to upscale it twice, possibly. And so, whereas modern films now, I think most films maybe are shot in 6K, 8K, and then unless if there's CGI involved, they then might get knocked down to a 2K digital intermediate, but still you're starting with a much greater amount of data than say with a 2.8K. So just certain times when I was watching Fury Road, it seems like there's something lacking here. It's I know that in some of the action scenes, it seems like he's skipping frames to impart a feeling of movement, and I think that's intentional on the part of Miller. So I'm okay with that, but it still seemed like I was watching a Blu-ray, even though the peak brightness in this film has been lauded by guys like HDTV Test, Vincent Teo, as being like amazing, super bright, but it almost seemed kind of fake. The brightness, like the way the sun reflects off of shiny surfaces, and like when the crazy guy with the flame-throwing guitar is doing his thing, the fire almost seemed kind of fake. Like it didn't seem organically bright, if you know what I mean. And I'm wondering if that's actually due to the fact that the source is really limited, is really limiting the overall resolution that could be possible with this 4K. So it's actually a little disheartening, and clearly there's no way to go back and improve the resolution. I mean, the source, the 2.8K, is already lower than what we're watching it with, 4K. And that's not been the case. That's not been the case before with film, because film could be scanned in at 8K, but we just don't, because there's no practical reason for it. But so now it's like we're able to watch films at a higher resolution than it was even captured. I mean, it's just the same as if you took like your camcorder photographed, your camcorder shot home movie, and then watched on your 4K TV. I mean, that's clearly way more of an exaggerated example, but it's the same idea because you're watching it with almost 10 times the potential, 10 times the resolution, going from 480 to 4K. Now, in the case of Fury Road, it's only you're going from 2.8 down to 2, and then so it's kind of like not twice, but maybe 1.5 times, but still, it's more, and it's noticeable, especially if you've been very used to watching newer 4Ks from the last 2 or 3 years and how they look compared to um, what Fury Road looked like being at 2015 4K. So it's just one of those things like you notice, and just to be on the lookout with regarding if you get one of these older 4Ks, or if you get one of these 4Ks that just seem to show up. I mean, there's a lot of these 4Ks that are just there. You don't know anything about, like, were they restorations, were they particularly redone for the 4K, or are they just literally Blu-ray upscales? And I think a lot of these early ones were. So just to buyer beware, you pay for what you get. You get what you pay for, excuse me. And in the case of some of these older ones, yeah, that's the case. So anyway, that's Mad Max. Other thing I got that just came in hot off the presses, Godfather Trilogy, finally restored in 4K. And so we have, in this case, which is pretty nice, individual, I guess, cases for each film. So Godfather 1, and so they have the download codes as well. Oops. Godfather 3, sorry, Godfather Part 2, and what is no longer being called Godfather Part 3, but rather the Godfather Coda, the Death of Michael Corleone. And so I'm guessing that now, with the release of this, with the release of Godfather Coda, it's now been established that Godfather Coda is the official Godfather 3 in the eyes of Francis Ford Coppola, and that Godfather 3 has, I'm not even sure how you would describe what the original theatrical version of Godfather 3 is now. Is it? it's interesting. I don't really know how to describe it, but so there's another bonus disc set in here, and this contains the original feature, the original theatrical version of Godfather 3, as well as a 1991 cut. Now, I don't know anything about the 1991 cut. I mean, obviously, I'm well familiar with Godfather 3 theatrically. I watched it in the film, in the theater, and again, I have it on the Coppola restoration from 2008. So, not sure what the 1991 cut is, but we'll see. And then there's a special features disc included on Blu-ray. So that's the only Blu-ray disc in this set. So this is a 4K all 4 films on 4K only, and then a Blu-ray of the special features. So what that means is that I can sell off my Coppola restoration Blu-ray. Oh, and I'm having some trouble getting the sleeves back in, because unfortunately the problem is that nowadays they use these cheaper, flimsier, and you can see this is already kind of nicked up here, but it's like it's a flap that just folds out, and the problem is that the this edge here gets caught on that flap, and it's hard to get that in. So the difference being that with the 2008 the Godfather Coppola restoration set is that back then this case was not, see, it's a glued here, so there's no, so it's not a flap, but this is just everything's, but all films are just in this one case. So it's a trade-off. You get all 4 films in individually in their own case versus everything being in like one case with the films being on the fold out. So what that means is that I can sell off this one because from everything I've heard, the 4K set has everything that was on here, and obviously in 4K. So that's great. Now the one weird thing, and I really don't know why they did this in terms of packaging, but the copper restoration came with this booklet, which is, and so but it's not really a booklet. It's just, all it is just, it's like an extended J card where it just gives you a blurb about each film and what's on it. So it's not like you know, the booklets that you find in Arrow or Criterion where there's stories or interviews or things like that. It's all it is just information that you could get anywhere. So I'm not even going to include this when I sell this, because it's not like this booklet has no value. Plus, it doesn't even fit in the case. It doesn't even fit. See, it's like, it's bigger. So that's the one thing I always found was very strange about that booklet, was the way that they packaged it. Very strange. But anyway, so I'm going to sell that off. As I mentioned to you, I've been going through the Vinegar Syndrome collection and just seeing what films I want to keep, seeing what films I want to sell off. I've already sold off a few. Sold off Ebola Syndrome, sold off Master of the World. I'm actually surprised, I'm actually shocked that somebody wanted to buy it, but sold that off. Sold off Beware Children at Play. So then watch the 4K of Dead Heat that was in, I think, their last month's February set. And I couldn't make it through 10 minutes of this one. This one was awful. It's just, it seems very lowbrow, very cheesy. What Vinegar Syndrome has been doing they've been apparently plumbing the Canon and New World libraries, just finding films that they can transfer out and get on either 4K or Blu-ray, and this is one of them. So yeah, I already put this one up for sale. I'm hoping this one finds a home with someone who wants to watch this more than I, because yeah, this film is pretty bad. So there might be something much better later on, but just like the first 10 minutes just completely sold me on getting rid of this. So Curfew, same way. It's just kind of trashy. There's really nothing good to say about it. So I put this one up for sale as well. Drop Dead Fred. I'm keeping Drop Dead Fred now. It doesn't seem to fit in with the rest of the Vinegar Syndrome films. I don't even know how to categorize this film, but it's interesting enough. It's enough of a novelty that I just want to keep it around. The only problem is that this is one of the films that suffers from it being only a 2K restoration, because you can really tell the difference between 2K restorations and 4K restorations. So if you're out there shopping, and especially like a Severin or a Vinegar Syndrome or any of the other boutique labels, they'll tell you whether it's, usually most of the time they'll tell you if it's a 2K or a 4K. And knowing nothing else, knowing no other information about the actual quality of the source, if you see that they do a 4K scan and restoration from the 35mm original camera negative, more often than not always, but more often than not, it will be a better looking picture than if it's a 2K from 35mm OCN, or from any other source such as an interpositive or a print even. Now, there's been some good 4Ks from prints and interpositives, but more often than not, you usually won't go wrong, even if it's on Blu-ray, even if it's just a Blu-ray, but if it's 4K scan and restore from 35mm camera negative. So just a tip on that regard. So this film obviously has a lot more grain and it's just a lot, um, just less clarity than you would get from if they were able to do this in 4K, and they probably didn't do this in 4K because the source was just not as good. So, you know, but still, it's an interesting film. It's a novelty film, so I'm going to keep it around. And the halfway to the Vinegar Syndrome halfway to Black Friday pre-order just went live on their set, so I ordered their new 4K of Cloak and Dagger, which I totally forgotten about, but I've actually seen with Dabney Coleman and Henry Thomas. So I'm getting that. That is not part of the subscriber package, but I'm getting that because it looks pretty cool. And I got ordered another copy of Thriller: A Cruel Picture. Their version, their 4K set that they're doing. This is not the Synapse one. It's a totally separate release, and they've been very specific to indicate that this is not related at all to the Synapse release of Thriller. I ordered another copy. I'm going to keep that around and then sell it maybe when this copy starts going out of print or starts getting low, because they're pricing it at $80 retail. So you know, they're pushing this as their like big release of the year, and it's got 3 4K discs of the 3 different versions of the film. So yeah, they're putting a lot into this. So this should be a very hopefully a very a desired and a desirable package that they're releasing. So anyway, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed it. It's been a longer one, but went through a lot. And keep enjoying the physical media. Till then, I will see you. Bye-bye.